For days, she had been crying herself to sleep. A 5 minute interlude with a stranger at the parking lot of a rundown motel spun her world on its axis. She could be wrong, a gynecologist had said when she called him in the middle of the night about the two little lines on the stick. Surely the test was negative. They had to have changed the rules. But she knew the stick was right, just as she knew she could never be a professional athlete, despite the hours she spent making deals with God. She wasn't the exception, wasn't among the 1% false positives. Subsequent tests at the doctor's office confirmed it. For a week, her mind was an automaton directed to stay away from anything babies, napkins, pediatric related, and it worked until that call from her gynecologist. If she was to terminate it, the time is now. The roller coaster had stopped and she was left upside down. She was making the right decision, she thought. What did she even know of children? The few in her neighborhood looked at her like she was an alien. They sucked on their thumb but had their index finger in their nostrils and stared as she passed by. Their game paused, their high-pitched voices subsiding as they drilled holes into her with their eyes. She got in the shower to prepare for the procedure, brimming with nerves. Just 10 minutes, 10 minutes on the surgical bed, and her life will return to normal. Then she felt it, the quickening. Such a fancy word for emotion that would shape the rest of her life. The soap slipped from her palm and fell with a splash into the pool of water around her feet. It was too early, but she knew what she felt. With great care, she stepped out of the bath and onto her bed. There she lay for the remainder of the day, cupping her abdomen. The ringing of her phone did not stir her, nor did vibrations from numerous SMS. Her secretary left tons of voicemails and even forwarded emails from her boss threatening her position. She was detached. While the world around her went crazy, she curled up in a fetal position, shut her eyes, and thought of Giovanni. She was aged 12. She had just come home from school, and it was deathly quiet. It was Valentine's Day. She remembered because that day the senior girls pinned red boutonnieres to their blazers. They called it Red Color Day. Shade wasn't in the kitchen and Mama wasn't on the balcony. She had taken 2 steps up the stairs when she saw it. Blood, lots of it. It formed a trail, like when she spilled her orange juice on the dinner table. But then, Shade wiped it immediately because Mother gave her the look. The don't annoy me look. Where was Shade? Mama would be terribly upset. Staring clear of the blood, she tiptoed to her mother's room. She didn't have to knock, it was open. Mama never left her door ajar. An empty medicine pack lay on the floor and she picked it up. It was labeled Misoprostol 200. At the bathroom door, the blood was highest and it was darker than those on the stairs. No sign of Mama. By evening, she was still alone in the house, just her and the pool of blood. It looked fascinating. After completing her assignments, a pencil fell from the pages of her science notebook. It rolled into the sticky fluid and halted like a sports car ground into a halt. She picked it up, feeling the red liquid on her fingertips, but she liked the color on her palm. It reminded her of the time she helped Shade cut beetroot for salad. Carefully, she dipped the pencil into the red liquid and made a pattern. It was fun. Mama came back late at night in the arms of a man, the man in the red brush. His name, she later found out, was Ike, but that was later, much later, after Giovanni had left. She had never seen him in daylight. She watched from behind the curtains as he carried Mama up the stairs. He paused briefly when he saw the letters of the alphabet traced on the tiled floor using the blood. Thankfully,
Mama's eyes were shut, so she didn't see the mess. Shade came in later to bathe and feed her. Often, Shade would sniffle and pause to wipe her eyes with her shirt. She wasn't wearing her apron, and Bridget wanted to tell her to do so before Mama saw her, but she didn't. Shade hugged Bridget to her loud chest, and the wooden beads on the rosary pressed against her cheek, but Bridget didn't complain. Drops of liquid fell on her forehead. Bridget raised her fingers to it. It wasn't as sticky as the one on the floor. When she came down for breakfast, Mama wasn't at the table. Bridget wasn't surprised. Mama came down for breakfast whenever the man in the red. Mama didn't come down for breakfast whenever the man in the red Porsche visited. She didn't check her chin. She didn't check her chin before Shade took her to school. She didn't smile at her when she did her braids perfectly. Mama didn't smile at all. What happened last night? She asked Shade on the way to school, but only received one of Shade's sad, indulgent smiles, the one she gives on the Friday before Easter. Is Mama sick? Are you sick? Where did you go? Her rain of questions was met with conscious silence until they reached the school gate. At the dwelling tree, Shade crouched to whisper over the raucousness of children passing from their guardians. The blood was Giovanni's. With that, she patted Bridget's school bag and left for home. Shade took her to the charismatic crusade at St. Catherine's Parish. They attended vigil. Whenever the man in the red Porsche visited, he comes in the evenings and leaves early the next morning after chugging his milk in the fridge. No one drank 2% fat milk at home, but it was always stocked, and by morning, the carton would be 2 bottles less. One time, Lisa, the girl whose family lived next door, asked about the man in the red Porsche. Bridget didn't know what a Porsche was, but she smiled and made a motion with her head. Since then, he was the man in the red Porsche, and to Lisa, he was her uncle from the big city. The ride to St. Catherine was 20 minutes, 40 minutes with traffic, and the traffic was heavy that evening. In the seclusion of the back seat of the cab, Shade held her closely and spoke against her forehead. God gives Giovanni to people. Who is he? A baby. Shade continued. God gives him to watch over. He is strong enough to be out in the world. At this point, her sniffling had begun and intensified. He is kept in the care of parents. Sometimes he stays and sometimes he goes. He came to us, Bridget, and he is gone. The rest of the ride was quiet, save for Shade's fading sniffles. Giovanni came again when she was 13. She knew because, like before, Mama vomited in the morning and skipped wine during dinner. But this time, she would make sure he stayed. Bridget approached Shade tentatively in the kitchen. How do we get Giovanni to stay? The plates wobbled in Shade's hands. Since the cab ride, none of them had spoken about it. We don't, she smiled sadly. You said he comes from Jesus. Yes. And Jesus listens to us. Yes. So will you speak to Jesus? No, we will. They said 10 decades of the rosary at St. Catherine's Chapel for their family, and Giovanni at the foot of the cross. Jesus looked tired and drowsy. She wanted to tell Shade to hurry the prayers, lest he falls asleep. Turning from the statue of the crucified Jesus, she moved to the statue of Mary. She was carrying baby Jesus in her arms and looking solemn. She had lots of nice scented flowers around her. Last week, Reverend Christopher said she answers prayers faster, probably because she wasn't busy dying for the world and all. Bridget knew all the prayers of the rosary, and as her lips recited the words, her heart implored the nice lady. She told her to make Giovanni stay this time, to make Mama smile more, and to help her remember not to run downstairs. Mama always brought her hand to her chest whenever she did that. Finally, she prayed to be as pretty as Mama. She sat on the kitchen stool peeling oranges. Shade was supposed to take her to church, but she had a family emergency. Her son Tunde broke his arm, and there she was, waiting. But she couldn't fathom what she was waiting for until the door opened and Ike stepped in. In his palm was a drug packet. He pocketed it, but not before she saw it and recognized it. It was the same brown misoprostol packet she saw in Mama's room. She had the old packet in one of her experiment jars. After a perfunctory nod at her, he started for the stairs. word stopped him. Leave. Surprise gave way to amusement. He had never heard her speak. For all he knew, she was dumb. What did you say to me? He approached her. She drew to her full height of 5'1". You need to leave. It all happened in an instant. He swung his hand to her face and she reacted before thinking. Her hand came up in defense. He jerked back and Bridget felt something warm and liquid coat her fingertips. You bitch! He fumed, holding his palm protectively. His eyes swept over her and narrowed on the knife rimmed with blood in her hand. Where is your mother? The amusement had left his face. He took a step towards her. She took two towards him. Climb gas stair and I will go outside, slash your tires, and mutilate your pretty car. You're crazy, he backed up. You and your slut of a mother will pay for this. She will crawl and grovel before I take her back. He left, slamming the door behind him. She stood there till he zoomed off into the darkness. His heart stuttered, beating violently against her chest as she thought of what she had done. The knife fell with a clank into the aluminium sink. Quickly, she washed her hands and face, taking huge gulps of water. She shut the door, closed the blinds, and went to her room. Bridget found Mama staring at the floor the next morning as if in a trance, at the blood stains on the kitchen floor. Her footsteps jarred Mama. It's Ike's, Bridget said. He won't be coming back. She picked him up and began mopping the floor. Louisa watched her daughter mop the floor. Bridget was everything she wasn't. Intelligent, brave, and self-sufficient. She had a quiet and calm about her that belied a stubborn streak like her grandfather. Louisa had left home as a teenager with Larry, a man twice her age, passing through their modest town. A small budget movie producer. He promised her things, many things, but it wasn't the promise of fame and popularity that lured her. In him, she saw stability. She saw a gateway out of poverty. If there was anything Louisa knew how to do, it was to survive. No price was too big to pay. For all his negligence, Larry gave her a daughter, a roof over their heads, and they never went hungry. And then he died 2 years after that daughter was born. It became once more a struggle for us to survive until she met Roy, who gave her what she needed in exchange for what she had. He was good and kind to her until he found someone younger. On the brink of starving with her daughter, she met Ike. So far, he hadn't tired of her, and she was all too grateful. He requested that she always be available for him and her daughter out of his way. So she hired Shadi, sweet Shadi. So far, that had been the wisest thing she had done for her baby. Right from infancy, her baby had shown the reservation and maturity of an adult, coupled with a quiet tenacity that terrified and amazed her in an equal measure. She had tried to keep her job very far from Bridget, but she knew she hadn't been very successful. In the weeks following her drug-induced abortion, Bridget became more withdrawn than ever. She ate less and less, even after Shadi cooked her favorite meals every day for weeks. Worse, she didn't think Bridget noticed. That prompted a monthly doctor's appointment in the guise of a medical checkup. It cost her a lot, but it was a sacrifice she was happy to make. Anything for her baby. It didn't help that they had very different interests. Bridget wasn't interested in clothes or shoes or makeup. Rather, she collected shells that she kept in a little jar and fiddled with mud and irritating insects. But Louisa understood the need of having your own stuff, something to call yours. And so she bought her daughter more specimen jars and created space in the store for the grieving creatures. She had felt relieved and worried when Ike didn't show up yesterday. As she watched her daughter quietly clean the floor, she couldn't decide if she wanted to know what happened or not. But she believed Bridget when she said he wasn't coming back. Bridget peeked at Mama before entering her room. She hadn't known what to expect, but Mama had hugged her, kissed her forehead, and climbed upstairs. Later, when she entered Mama's room, Mama was going through her makeup box, arranging and rearranging. She always did that when she was nervous. Bridget sat beside her mother. They held hands and talked of school, of the food Shadi prepared. They never spoke of Ike. Shadi met them like that. When she came by in the afternoon, her son was fine, but she would be away for some time. Some time turned to never. as they had to sell the house and move to the suburbs where it was cheaper and where Mama found a job as a receptionist. It was there Giovanni became Richard, her baby brother. The opening of her door brought Bridget back to the present. The Channel 5 perfume heralded her mother's arrival. The blurry shape of her mother knelt on the bed. Her mother opened her arms and the dam broke. She burrowed into her mother's arms, content. Louisa held her child and rocked as she had done decades ago. My brave little soldier, she praised. Everything will be alright, Bridget. And Bridget believed her. Stories from our diary episode 2 is coming out next week Friday. And don't forget to